Okay, hello my students. Welcome to another video with Mr. D's math class. This time we are going to show you part 2 of 4.2 linear relation, that's on graphing. Okay, so I'm going to show you a proper way to actually create a graph. So I'm going to, first of all, I think I'll put the data table here of the data set that I'm going to graph for you, and we did this in class, so this one is just an additional video instruction for you just in case maybe you were away, or maybe you were sleeping during class, or too busy eating or stuffing your face. Okay, so the first thing you got to do when you graph is, preferably, you should highlight the horizontal axis and the vertical axis, and bold it like I've done here, so you could, somebody looking at this could see where your axes are. And then you really should label your axes so that we know what those axes are telling you on a graph. This very corner here, this should be what I'd like to call ground zero. Okay, that's a 0, 0 mark. So now, before I graph anything, before I plot any points on here, I really should have a very consistent intervals with my numbers. So for the x-axis, or my x values, I think what I'm going to use is, with every 2 squares, I'm going to label it as 1, count it as 1. Because from our data table, we really are only going from 1 to 4. So. And I spaced them out just to make them look neat. Okay. With the y-axis, it looks like we're only going from 1 to 13, so I do have enough squares here to count up to 13, counting each one of these squares up to 13. But for neatness sake, what I'm going to do is actually I'm only going to label every second one, so I'm going to count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14. So now I actually do have enough to be able to plot the y-axis. So this graph is ready to be plotted. It's got labeled axes and it's got proper consistent intervals with the numbers on horizontal and vertical axis. So let's start plotting the data table. So the first point is actually 0, 1. And if some of you recall, in grade 7, when we actually had an assignment, when I gave you an assignment on plotting points on a coordinate plane, well, these 0, 1 here on the x and y, this is actually just the ordered, what they used to call ordered pairs. So that's what we're going to plot here. Okay. So on the x-axis, it's 0, so you don't really go left or right. You just stay where you are and wait for where you're going to go with the y. Well, the y is just 1, so 0 on x is here, and 1 on the y is here. So this is actually 0.01. So I'll label it for now. The next one would be 1 and 4. And so 1 on the x and 4 on the y is here. So that's 1, 4. Next we have 2, 7. Okay, so 2 and 7 is here. Okay, and then just keep going. It's 310, and then 413. So where's 310? Is here, and then 413 is right here. Okay, so it's a linear relation, so you really should get a straight line. If you don't end up with a straight line, maybe should have a look at your points again and replot it. So now I'm going to connect these points, but I'm going to use a broken or dotted line, it's called, because I'm not sure if, I can only assume that these are actually discrete datas. So later on, part 4 of this 4.2 linear relations is talking about why we should use dotted line or why we should use solid line. In this case, we're going to use dotted line. So wait for that video coming up later on discrete and indiscrete data and solid versus broken line. So this is a good graph. It's got labeled axes, it's plotted, it's a straight line. Okay, so I just want to demonstrate for you an example of maybe not so good graph. Okay, so again, preferably when you're making a graph, first of all, when you do a graph, please don't do it on a loose leaf because it'll never be as accurate or as neat. Okay, so when you're making the axes, please make sure you use a ruler. For neatness sake, it's easy to read. Okay, so I'm going to make a few mistakes here. First of all, this corner should never start as 1, so this is a bad idea here. Okay, so and then the next one, we'll label this 2 and then 3 here, and then 2 here, and then 4, etc. Okay, so in this graph already we have a few mistakes. First one is here. You should not start this corner at 1. Second, you got to keep this consistent, your counts consistent. So if you want one square to be counted as 1, you can't change your mind and say, okay, 2 squares is equal to 1. Okay, and the same thing here. This person started with 2 squares counting as 2, and then they changed their mind and said 1 square is equal to 2. So inconsistent numbers. Okay, and there is also no labels on the axes, so this is not going to be a very good graph and will not get you a very good mark. So I guess that's it for now for graphing linear relations. So if you have any questions, make sure you could you could email me, and I do hope that this video helps. Goodbye for now.